Hello, everybody. Hello, Nick.
Good morning, Yuri. How are you? Looking sharp with the hat. Very
Oh,
nice.
yeah. Thank you so much. I love compliments to my hat more than anything else. Listen, Nick Chamberas, I'm talking not to you, but to the audience. Nick Chamberas is a public affairs strategist, as you can see on screen. And we met when I was starting out this channel, and I was supporting Vito Bruno in his run for state assembly, right? State
Uh,
senate.
Senate.
State Senate, right? So Nicholas was his campaign manager, strategist, and everything else, and it was something to analyze. And we just talked about it, how it went when Vito was running, and the his victory seemed to be really a possibility. And for those of you who are wondering where they are, why they're here, and why, of course, you can see my accent, hear it, but also the Russian lettering in the beginning. It's an old caricature, old cartoon by Punch magazine, sometime from 40s or 30s, and it was in my first textbook in English, of English language. And it's about the person who's doing everything opposite to this, whatever sign says to him. It says keep to the left, he goes on the right. It says keep silent, he yells. Don't no smoking, he smokes. And only when he sees this low entrance, mind your head, it says, because it's a British thing. So he has to bend. So mind your head is the motto of this program. Whatever happens, whatever views we have to adopt, and more importantly, whatever views we have to adjust to, because we are humans and we see the situation changing. So we have to keep our head leveled. So that's how we try to keep this program. So with this, I would like to open the floor to you, sir. And you want to talk to us about Bidenomics and your view on it. Uh, in light of your article that was published on Newsmax website, and you're a contributor to Newsmax magazine. So, Nicholas, take it away.
I think it's interesting now. In the summer, the Biden administration was embracing the term Bidenomics, and they were running with it. And now they're running away from it because really the administration has been a disaster for middle class and working class families. Uh, it's not a matter of opinion if you look at the hard economic statistics. Um, 61% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. In the United States, a couple of decades ago, that would have been unheard of. That would have been an indication of a depression. We're in dangerous times. Inflation, by any objective measure, is higher than it has been in 40 years. Some economists argue that it's higher than ever. Um, I like to say you may have heard of the expression "there's no such thing as an atheist in a foxhole." Well,
Yeah.
pretty
On the
soon,
in the airplane, they're also,
yeah,
yeah.
pretty soon there's going to be no such thing as a Democrat in a supermarket. Um, Things have just really spiraled out of control, and we don't just see um, people, minimum wage workers struggling. We see middle class workers who don't have money to put gas in their cars, and when gas doubles and triples, that's going to happen to anybody. So we're seeing a lot of pain. We're seeing the war on domestic energy production, which makes no sense when you're trying to combat inflation, when costs of production, costs of transportation are so high, and the government is spending so much money, trillions of dollars. It makes no sense to cut back on domestic energy production, which is automatically not only going to increase the price of fuel, it's going to increase transactional costs, which will increase the price of consumer goods. And like with the Keystone Pipeline, do you think it was a bad idea to just let go of 40,000 high-paying jobs? So we're seeing
Real
that.
jobs, not government jobs, not
Yes,
public sector jobs.
yes, exactly. The United States will never thrive in a crony corporatist system where half the half the employees work for the government. That's not how we grew. That's not how we prospered, and we that's not sustainable in our country. You know, if we were to sustain that kind of model, we would see Venezuela type devaluing of our currency. So by any again, his economic policy seems to be keep some of the big CEOs happy, big companies happy, make these arrangements beforehand, and these insane subsidies to enter to these so-called green companies that are failing. They have a $400 billion fund. Some might call it a slush fund. They have a $400 billion fund to give subsidies to these so-called alternative energy companies. And with the war on energy, gas, um, those companies should be thriving. They're not thriving. They're cutting back. Um, so we have we had a booming auto industry in the United States, and now basically Biden is trying to phase that out by forcing people into EVs, electronic powered, and 10 years from now, if those measures take effect fully as realized and as designed, the auto industry in the United States won't exist. That's just a fact. That's reality.
Yeah, and we are also tied with so many rules and regulations when it comes to the automotive, especially in California, where they kind of I mean, our electorate apathy is pathetic, I would say, in the United States. We are all, I dealt with retail politics last year, and this year as well. I was collecting signatures for petitions of all kinds, and I see people locally and here in New York and Brooklyn. I'm in Brooklyn here, and I'm in a pretty red area, maybe the reddest one. Now, yeah, of course, for a couple of years we already the reddest in New York City, the Shipshead Bay area, most Republican, and people are just sitting watching television, and they say, I will vote for Trump. I will vote for Trump. I welcome this. It says so on my hat that I'm with you, friends. You listen to my programs. I thank you so very much for it. But you got to vote locally for good candidates. And Republican Party has to provide a candidate in every electoral district here. Wherever there is an election, there must be a Republican that you have to get. And this is your main job, to select and then to elect people who are working on the spot. Here we have a precious few Republicans who were designated by Republican Party. We have a lot of initiative on the ground, but we have to work with the our voices to be heard. And we don't get it. People call me. They say, "I'm looking at the at the ballot. There is no Republican, not a single one. Who should I vote for?" Some areas in New York, there's no Republican candidate. It's a shame. But I digress from the topic of Bidenomics, because this is how you change the situation. That's why I kind of seemingly strayed away from your topic.
I don't think you digressed. It goes hand in hand. The reason why President Biden was able to win the election is because of too many local politicians were Democrats. And look, voters, I understand, residents, they're very busy. The economy is not the same. People are working longer hours for less money, right? And they just don't have the time and the energy to devote to politics, to getting involved necessarily where they may have in the past. But the problem is, this is not an empire. We don't have a king or an emperor. Even if Trump wins, we know full well that the elected officials below him, and we saw this from 2016 to 2020, the lower elected officials will do everything they can to stymie him, to frustrate him. So it goes hand in hand. I'm sorry, just let me get a sip of water.
It's a change in weather. I know a lot of people.
Yeah, it goes hand in hand. We need more involvement at the local level. And yes, you should have Republicans running in every area. Um, I'm so sorry. The issue is it's not just having candidates running. In many counties, we do a terrible job of recruiting candidates. So it goes from both ends. We have a candidate like you who did phenomenally. I mean, come on, you kudos to you in
Thank
your
you.
race against Hakeem Jeffries.
Minor detail didn't win.
Look,
Yeah. In
it,
retrospect, yeah, it looks impossible. It was even more, although it was looked more impossible when I started out. But
well, again, but you did a major service to the Republican Party because if we don't contest that seat, right? If Hakeem Jeffries is not afraid at all and doesn't have to participate and campaign in your district, he's campaigning in other parts of the country. If he's not
yeah,
in Brooklyn, he's in a swing seat in Iowa campaigning for a Democrat, or he's having a fundraiser for a Democrat in Michigan, right, in a close race.
yeah,
So you did a tremendous service to the Republican Party throughout the country because you have to keep them busy. That's why we run candidates. On the other hand, one thing we have to work on, and since you brought it up, um, we need to work on better candidate recruitment. I'm not going to mention any specific examples. I'm not here to hurt anyone's feelings or cause any misunderstandings or miscommunications. But when you look at the city council races, we contest so few of them. And then in some of those races, these people were not vetted clearly. Um, they were just thrown in there and they go out and want to be famous. So they say the craziest things that come to mind, and voters just get turned off by that. So, yeah, absolutely. We need to build the party. We need better candidates, stronger candidate recruitment. And I encourage everyone, people are going to think I'm her agent or something. I'm really not. I do consider her a friend. Uh, she's terrific, but I love the example of Vicky Palladino, Councilwoman Vicky Palladino.
yeah,
Um, when Vicky ran, she was not a darling of the political establishment in Queens. She was absolutely not, right?
yeah.
Um, it all started when Bill De Blasio went into her neighborhood, and she had her husband stop the car, and she
Hmm.
confronted. That's how it started. But then she went about it very seriously, and yes, the establishment didn't like her in the beginning. They threw everything at her, but she built an organization. She raised money, um, and now she won re-election by a landslide.
She's
So
fantastic. She's on fire. I get so much energy when she from when I see her on screen, and she deserves more screen time for sure.
yeah, I mean, how many times did you hear during her tenure? Oh, Vicky said this. She's done now. Oh, she said what? Oh, that's it. It's over. And no, let's have more Vicky Palladino. Serious, thoughtful, but courageous people. People who aren't afraid of their own shadow.
Yeah.
So that's what we need at the city council level, I think.
Yeah, and then just to clearly explain that what's going on in New York right now in New York City is unsustainable. They talk about a lot about sustainability, but how can they sustain a city when the 100,000 people moving out in a year? What the people who can afford, by the way, to move? Not anybody can afford. Not everybody can move out of New York with all the ties that we have, with all the familial tightness that we have here, and people leave the city, and it loses the glossy side of it absolutely because listen, Broadway is pretty much in the hands of diversity, equity, and inclusion crowd. And same goes for the galleries, and there's no diversity basically when you start fighting for diversity. You all of a sudden discover yourself in the middle of a cultural desert because it's not how you cannot regulate art, you cannot regulate freedom of speech, freedom of expression. And I am closing my mouth right now because I just came out of a ban by YouTube for some post that I had 3 years ago. For a week, I wasn't able to talk to people, but I went to other platforms. They're not as popular as YouTube, but I kept producing my videos, and when I posted them, people flocked like tenfold. to watch what they missed. It is there. The audience is there. The political uh, kind of fruits of political victory are there. So if you go for it, you'll eventually reach out and get them and deliver what is expected of you as a Republican. But
Yeah.
let's go back to Bidenomics. Uh, so you say it's fading a little bit. We all feel it. I mean, as a subject for Biden's kind of achievements. But what's going to be next? What he could possibly claim as his success on the backdrop of the open border in the South and things happening in Israel, things happening in Ukraine, and can you please just put your strategist hat and tell us what's in store for us in the next five
So
minutes?
I'm not going to be one of those Pollyannish Republican strategists who pound the chest and say we're winning by a landslide and we're going to win bigly and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. No, we're not. I hope so. It would be common sense that we would win not just at the federal level but at the local level in 2024. It would make. I just want to say this before I get in trouble and I'm misunderstood. It would make complete sense next year if the Republican Party won across the board in huge landslides. And we should. Now let's deal with reality. Okay?
Yeah,
Um, we have a compliant mainstream media that they don't function as, news checkers, news reporters. These, many of them, not all, there's some good exceptions, but let's be real. They're cheerleaders for a failed administration. I think some dictators would look at what's going on here and the reporting, and they would blush with embarrassment. So when you have the mainstream media presenting an alternative version of reality, that's a huge advantage for any strategist, um, for any elected official, and that's what's been going on with Biden. I think if you had the inflation we have now under President Trump, there would be demonstrations in the streets for sure. Um,
yeah, and they were.
real, real income has declined. I think if you take into account inflation, real income has declined anywhere, depending on the study, between 1 to 3%. Some other studies are outliers; they have it 5 or 6%. Now, let's see which president ushered in the biggest expansion of real wage growth for middle class and working class families in the last 50 years. Can you take a guess? Which
Yeah,
president?
it's before your eyes. The-
So President Trump again.
yeah,
His economic program ushered in unseen and definitely unexpected prosperity. I mean, do you remember on election night when they were saying, "Oh, the stock market's tanking tomorrow. We're going into depression," and nonsense like that. But what I expect is going to happen. Biden is going to use the employment numbers, which are decent, but again, um, when you lose millions of jobs because of the shutdown, and we don't need to get into that, obviously, but for whatever reason, they decided to shut down the country, shut down society across the world, right? So many people's lives were upended. Many people lost their livelihoods, their careers, their businesses. So when you press pause and you lose all of those jobs and you restart the economy, you don't get to, you really shouldn't claim credit for those jobs. Um, so across the country, we see home ownership. The American dream for anyone, for someone born here, for someone whose parents were born here, who came on the Mayflower, who came yesterday, right?
yeah.
Home ownership is part of the American dream. That is now like a fairy tale in almost any part of the country. How sad is that? Um, we have corporations and LLCs buying up houses. Um, I'm not an economist, so I'm not going to go too deeply into the implications of something like that could have on a larger scale for the economy, for renters, for prospective homeowners. But that's dangerous. And, it can't be that buying a home is now reserved only for the top 1%, or someone who's worth $10 million. Anyone who's qualified, who can afford it, should be able to buy a home in the United States. But now it's becoming insanely unaffordable, and not just in New York City, which is proverbially expensive,
Mhm.
but you're looking at Middle America. People are struggling to pay their rents, let alone buying a house.
It's very one of the words Donald Trump is using now in his speeches is sad. That's a short way of expressing how you feel about uh, the American opportunities. Yes, America remains the richest country in the world, and what President Trump did, and I use this metaphor maybe too often, but he's like a pilot of a big airliner, and he gets into the cabin and he knows how to lift this big bird up, and no one else would touch this. Not a sane person would touch this, not knowing how to make it work. And he sees this prosperity, he knows the depths. He's not someone who spent 50 years in government of his life and just collecting dollars here and there in the countries that are dependent on your decision, like Biden family seems to have done throughout years. But his job was, he's a different person. We haven't seen such person in politics, and it scared the bejesus out of the world leaders and out of the Davos so-called collective Davos, or whatever they call them, devils. And the EU also was at a loss, because it's not how this world was governed for last uh, I don't know, since Ronald Reagan at least, but I would even go back to Harry Truman, to Calvin Coolidge, to American presidents who brought a dollop of reality into our economics, because we are very creative people. And speaking of creativity, how would you interpret the numbers on Wall Street? The market seems to be going up. Uh, they're like booming every other day. And what's going on there? Why? How Wall Street reflects the state of Bidenomics?
So I would ask them to look at it macro, right? Not a few glimpses in time. And we all hope the stock market does well, no matter what. But see how much wealth reduction has taken place on the stock market during Biden's administration, and compared to what happened to the stock market during the Trump administration, when people were predicting depressions. Um, Again, there was an explosion, an economic explosion on Wall Street during the Trump administration, and I think Wall Street right now is calmed by fears that we're not going to go into a depression, because some people have been talking about that. About a recession, a soft landing. So there are going to be fluctuations in the stock market. I myself, and um, I'm not confusing myself with Friedman or anyone like that, but I myself would not put too much stock into what's going on in the stock market right now, uh, regarding what's going to happen with the economy in 2024. I think
Yeah,
this is a snapshot of time.
it's in a great it's a great of the stock market is has become like media, mainstream media has become a political instrument. So if our guy says that stock market is doing great, then it's a good thing. If the other guy is saying stock market is doing great, it's a bad thing. So I try not to pin my thinking to how it goes, because it's a tool, basically, just like would be mainstream media. Just tell us the news, tell us what's going on, and go to your vacations. But they don't do this, and stock market doesn't do that as well. Doesn't do the job telling about the real economics and tell us how the green jobs, how this and that will affect our well-being. Meantime, you know, I used to I love Mark Stein, the columnist and the writer, and the all around bright political writer. And at one point, when he was sitting in for late Rush Limbaugh, and he was saying that our country is kind of trading our future for cheap iPhones, We use cheap iPhones made in China, and we're happy about it. But our children will only would get as high as the job at the cash register, and nothing against people working in the cash register. I respect them. Ask anybody who knows me. I'm most respectful to people at the cash register, but we are denigrating ourselves because we look at the numbers and we are trusting the numbers and we're trusting the words said on TV, and look what's going on. What's going on in schools
Well,
with the education. Look at the Harvard right now. It's a disgrace of planetary proportions.
excellent point, and I liked your comment about the cash register because I've worked the cash register. I've worked the cash register many times, and there is nothing wrong with it, right? However, anyone expecting to buy a house with a job on a cash register is going to be sorely disappointed. Anyone who wants to raise a family on with that kind of job, that it's not possible. Now, there's some in the government. Let's let's expand our horizon to this conversation, right? There's more people in the government now than ever that don't think we should own homes, that they think someone should be perfectly happy at a minimum wage job from the time they're 18 to the time they're 80, or whatever the government deems is appropriate.
Government controlled
Yes, so
minimum
they'll
wage.
be reliant on the government for food. They'll be reliant on the government for health care, for transportation, and for shelter now. That's the model, and it's really sad. You know, and like you said about the iPhones, there are a lot of people now, especially recent college graduates, where there are jobs that during the Trump administration, recent college graduates would have scoffed at. They never would have taken those jobs, those offers. The economy was roaring. Now you have college graduates fighting over those jobs that they wouldn't have taken before, and
Yeah.
it's sad. It's sad to see. And one of the things that President Trump doesn't get nearly enough credit for, which, and again, I'm glad you brought up the issue about the iPhone, is trade. What he did for trade in our country,
Yeah.
and um, he renegotiated NAFTA, which was maybe the dumbest, the dumbest arrangement that this country has ever signed in on, the North American Free Trade Agreement. It caused, like, it was like an economic slasher film. Like, at the time, I remember they marketed it. I think it was what, 93 when they passed it, and the slogan was NAFTA, we have to. And
Hmm.
again, it was this slick marketing campaign. At the time, we had a $6 billion surplus with Mexico. Can you imagine? Um,
No.
and it was just a disaster. Then we negotiated not only USMCA, which it helped Mexico and Canada, and it helps workers in Mexico. But the Trump administration got tough on trade with China, which was
Yeah.
very important. And we have to have a manufacturing sector in this country. Um, as far as I know, we don't even produce. Excuse me. We don't even produce aspirin anymore.
Mm.
It's not sustainable. And like you said, there's no reason not to have a manufacturing base here. Um, it's not about buying cheap stuff. You know why we're able to buy cheap stuff? Because there's literally 9 year olds who should be in school. I don't care what country you're in. A child should be in school. They should not be enslaved in a factory. But few people in the mainstream media want to talk about this. That yes, you get this for $1.99, whereas if you made it in America, it would cost $2.49. But that's because of slave labor. And if we're going to be enlightened and so-called progressive, what's progressive about using little kids in grueling labor? There's nothing enlightened or progressive about that. And Trump, he was able to get tough on China on trade, and that helped the economy tremendously. We have to rebuild the manufacturing sector in the United States. End of discussion. The the myth of free trade is over. There's no such thing as a free trade. There's there's a winner and there's a loser.
Oh,
Um,
always.
now I'm in favor of open markets. Please, I'm not a protectionist. But you have to understand, trade has to be unilateral. It doesn't make sense for me to have my market wide open to a country and then have to face 55,000 tariffs in their country. There's no real economic incentive benefit for the country. There may be for a small set of investors or special interest groups, but in the end, it's the taxpayers who are subsidizing those agreements.
Yeah, we live in a world of cognitive dissonance, and nowhere is more manifest than in what's going on our TV screens, in our internet, and the commentators of all stripes. They kind of say totally different things, opposite things every day, uh, and it's conflicting information. And part of the plan, I think, if we can talk about the plan, because we are ran out of conspiracy theories, they all turn to be true. Part of the plan to get people confused and get people depressed and get people grasping for information, and that's part of why I am here, because I try to take up the space, with my opinion, and which is evolving, so to speak, but not to the degree that who was this famous evolver in chief who said Kerry or so, somebody John Kerry or something. He evolved. He was for it before he was against it.
Oh yes, man.
Yeah, that was flip flopping thing. But we naturally grow. We naturally adopt good ideas, and I wouldn't be as you said, free trade. I mean, it's a good thing to talk about how liberal you are and how you are pro free trade. But if you run a country, you have to protect people. You have to protect. This is your job. You don't have to take sides, but if there is a tariff, you make the other side think. Does it worse for them to keep trading? Does it worse it for China? Mm, to continue, say, manufacture steel for us and sell it to us, and what's the margin, profit margin for them to pay the tariffs and supply the steel, or we can do it ourselves, and we got to start doing it ourselves. And uh, there is a big, also the big conversation was, I recently had a very heated discussion, mostly in the comments, because conversation was pretty vegetarian. Was a Ukrainian blogger, very popular guy over there, and I called him onto my program. I think Nick. Oh, you're good. So I called him to my program, and I told him our side of the story, because Ukraine intelligentsia, so to speak, or general population is being brainwashed by good God Biden, who's coming to everybody, and he's bringing help and he's bringing money, and we see this. Drying up before our eyes, day by day. It gets smaller and smaller. Help to Ukraine for a number of reasons, and people still keep worshiping Biden. And I'm saying he's no more. He's for the next cadence. Uh, some words I don't know how to pronounce properly. But for the next few years, he will be not a factor in political landscape. So you need to have a dialogue both with the Republicans and the Democrats, instead of just showing your allegiance as people only to Democrats. Because American Republicans look at you and they have good interpreters like myself, so they would tell them word for word what you're saying. You hate Republicans. This is what you said 5 minutes ago, 2 years ago. This is what you said. You hate Republicans because of George Soros's infusion of money into Ukrainian media, etc., etc. So start the dialogue. Find the right way. That's what I'm saying. Should be the correct way to deal with a situation like they have there in Ukraine with Russian invasion. And I'm all on the side of Ukraine, and I'm against Russia in equal parts, so to speak. I'm not more on the side of Ukraine than I'm more against Russia, because what it's a very bad example. So in light of this, another meaning that we have to revisit, another term that we have to revisit would be American isolationism. Sorry, sorry. Isolationism. Would it be good for America to become more isolated? Because when you build a wall in the south and you build a wall in the north, and you have the seas on both sides, The water on both sides, oceans, sea. Sorry. Uh, so what? It's New York, people. Yeah, deal with that. So,
This is
yeah. So, how do you look at the idea of America becoming more isolated, at least in the perception-wise? Because as Saul Alinsky famously said, the power is perception of power. So, what is isolationism? Is American isolation is perception of American isolation.
well, one thing. Since you mentioned the border, before anything else, we need to secure the border. This is unsustainable. Um, I'm sorry. This is not. It doesn't matter what country people are coming from. There's a huge difference between the immigration of 30 years ago, 20 years ago, even 10 years ago. Um, no one was crossing the border 10 years ago for free stuff, and basically cradle to grave posterity provided by the United States government. And we can't afford it. There's one thing to be compassionate, but there's one thing to bankrupt your city, state, and eventually the government, the federal government. This is unsustainable. We can't absorb 30 million unvetted migrants in the course of a few years. Um, so it's very important that we control our borders. I personally think the United States must have an active role in global affairs because we do have a global economy, and weakness breeds aggression. And no matter where you stand on Ukraine or Russia or the Middle East, does anyone really believe that this war in Ukraine would be raging on if Donald Trump was in office? No one believes that. Again, I'm not saying
It
that it's
didn't
a
happen. It was the same Putin at the time. like like uh like in Russian they say it in Russian like a mouse behind a broom. He was described.
so. Doesn't make sense to just under the Biden administration. There's perennial weakness. No one really knows who's in charge. I hate to proliferate this hype, but I tried to deny it myself for a long time. Oh, this is the president, sure, whatever. Do we really know who's in charge right now? It just doesn't seem like we do. Um, Things are spiraling dangerously out of control, and it's obviously not just Ukraine. It's not even just what's going on in the Middle East, which is very scary right now. Um, you have North Korea flexing its muscles again, and there was a conversation that I believe China's Premier Xi had with Biden. I don't remember it verbatim, so I want to be as responsible as possible in recollecting the conversation, in depicting the conversation. But he basically told the president that they're going to invade Taiwan or that they're going to take over Taiwan.
Yeah, a
Uh,
limited incursion, as Biden famously said regarding Ukraine and Russia.
yeah,
Fair. Limited incursion.
the fact that the Chinese premier could say this to the president of the United States is frightening. It's alarming and it's unsettling. And again, that's because there's a power vacuum. No one really knows who's in charge. So I think that the United States definitely has a role to play. At the same time, financially, European nations also have a role to play in that we can be leaders and we can be um, sort of the insurance, right? The the backstop to all of this uncertainty and violence. But Donald Trump was the person who made NATO countries pay their fair share. There's only a handful of countries right now, I think, who are um, honoring their commitments, and those are the ones with hostile borders.
Mm.
So, um, we do have a role to play on the global stage. We should play it, but we also have to make sure our allies pay their fair share. That's very important. And I think everything for our country. I mean, the border is just this is not sustainable for anybody. I don't care if you were one of those open borders advocates from a few years ago. Clearly, by any objective measure, you have to see this is not working. Walk around New York City. Who thought
Yeah.
this was a
That was my final question to you, or an invitation to talk about New York City. Because whenever we talk about prosperity, about economics in this country, and when it comes from the higher ups, from the people who run this country, politicians, they immediately go for, oh, this is for minorities, or this is for the, I don't know, equity, inclusion, etc., etc. Oh, they only talk about business in these terms. Whereas we need to open the floodgate of entrepreneurship among Americans, so everybody who's anybody should think about becoming independent, not to dream about the city jobs in New York City, which are also in shambles right now because there's so much money and cuts all across the services of the city, which inevitably reflects in the pay and the promises. We only keep promises to the foreign powers, our country, like Iran. We it's their money. We got to give it to them. But our people, they can take any cut. They can bleed all they want. We'll never take care of them. This money would be very useful for so many unfulfilled promises of our government here in the country. But with all this, we have like two ways to talk about New York City, and both are related to Eric Adams. Uh, on his face, and there are two avenues to go by, so you pick which one. How to go about the unleashing the entrepreneurship of New Yorkers and make us more inventive and free in our business endeavors, or our plans to do business in New York City. Or we can talk about the absolutely obvious campaign against Eric Adams, for him being quite vocal, not exactly to the point of where it really would hurt White House, but talking about the compensation for accepting so many migrants in the city at the expense of those who live in the city, basically. So the White House is non-responsive in terms of supporting him. Instead, they sicked the FBI on him, took his phone away, his iPad away. This is kind of unheard of, if you ask me. And I'm following the New York City politics in a way. And so, what would you rather talk about as we land this conversation successfully? What would you say in conclusion? Would it be the land of repressions versus New York mayor Eric Adams, or the ways, positive ways, uplifting ways to uh, say to people, don't leave. There's still money to be made here. You may not be hired, but you can have your business working here. It was the story of New York, because people came here, they got their, I don't know, cart, street cart with the herring, pickled herring on the Lower East Side, and off they went.
That's a great formulation. Let me try to address all of it because I think it's interrelated, if you don't mind.
Sure,
Um,
absolutely.
so yes, this is the place where people used to come to make it. It's not the case anymore. Let's not delude ourselves. This is not the New York City of even 20 years ago or 30 years ago. Anyone who comes here with honest intentions, some will definitely make it for sure, but it's harder than ever. This is a struggle because of all of the burdens placed by city, state, mainly city and state government in New York City. If you're an entrepreneur, if you're hungry, if you want to work, there's far more restrictions on you than ever before, and we have a exploding crime rate. I mean, I have a friend of mine. We were involved in a toy drive yesterday, and he was just casually mentioning how he didn't sleep much because his basement was robbed, um, and he had to spend 5 hours with the police. And it would have been such a big deal a few years ago. Now it's like, oh, was it the first time? No, um, I think the unhinged radical left that dominates New York City politics has one plan for the migrant crisis and all this spending. They're expecting a bailout. They're expecting a huge federal bailout.
They're
Um,
hostages, basically, those migrants. They're
uh,
hostages.
well, I I guess here's where we might differ. I don't think so because um, they know they're not here legally, and we can get into the legal arguments about that some other
Yeah.
time, and that person is illegal, et cetera, et cetera. These species asylum claims, let's discard them, because if you really are applying for asylum, you can just as easily apply for asylum in Mexico. You don't need to go through the entire country. So if you're in danger, if you're being victimized, as soon as you hit another country, you can apply for asylum there. Um, let's
You must
let
apply. It's like international law. Once you cross the border of a country where your life was threatened, I'm an interpreter. I've dealt with a lot of interviews of asylum seekers, etc. So yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly.
so they're coming here because of various reasons, and it's easier to come here and more comfortable than it's ever been before. But we can't pay for this. Eric Adams knows this. Um, I can't speak for the mayor. I don't know how he thought this was going to work out in the beginning. And also another thing, only a very small number of the migrants that are arriving from buses from Texas and other states. Um, you probably know this, but maybe some of the viewers and listeners don't. 85% of those migrants are being flown in by the government.
Yeah.
Um, so I think Eric Adams did not, obviously, he didn't expect this. I think he's the hostage now. He's the hostage because we don't have a potent opposition in New York City. You see, we started off our conversation. People are apathetic. Um, Under different circumstances, we should have won so many city council races, but we can't because of they gerrymander some seats. But in reality, we're not at the point yet where people are just saying we've had enough and they're organizing and doing things on their own. I'll give you a great example. I don't know how much time we have, but I'll give you a quick example. I I actually spoke about this. It came as a surprise to some people who weren't familiar with the situation. Christy Marmorato, who I think is going to be fantastic as a councilwoman from the Bronx. Um, Christy Marmorato beat a heavily favored incumbent in Throgsneck, basically Throgsneck, some other areas, Morris Park of the Bronx. No one gave her a chance. The real estate lobby spent an enormous amount of money against her, but there was grassroots support for her. There were issues like upending the zoning of Throgsneck and building certain facilities in Morris Park, which catered to recently released people from prison and other programs. And people would
Mm,
finally just set up, and you're looking at the numbers that night, and you're seeing triple the turnout in certain precincts of years before, even in presidential elections. So that needs to happen in the rest of the city. Um, Maybe I'm too optimistic, but clearly people can't be okay with what's going on in New York City. I mean, I know I focus on national issues a lot, but clearly we can't be okay with this. We can't be happy with what our elected officials are doing. I don't think anyone signs up for seeing anyone, whether it's an American citizen or a migrant, sleeping outside in the street in 10-degree temperature. Senior citizens being afraid to go out of their houses because they're going to be robbed. I don't think anybody signed up for this.
no.
We can't just have, this is not okay. This is not working. So people need to eventually mobilize, or it's going to get much worse.
Yeah, New York had its ups and downs, and it's there are ways to deal with that. But for the sorry, it's there are ways to deal with that unless you totally ignore the common sense and you are kind of have plans and not don't have plans in this galaxy for the rest of your life. You want to just do the what they inflict on us and then just disappear out of public eye. And there are of course things being unpunished on that's done on that scale, but it's it's our duty now. It's our time now because we were using so much years of prosperity, so many years of quiet life, but it turns out in every life of every person there is a time to kind of hoist the flag, so to speak, right? and stand for what you think you believed all your life. This is time to prove it. Nick, great, thank you for coming and making this conversation possible. I also would like to make a little announcement, if you don't mind. It's all good. It's about Christmas. It's a Christmas toy giveaway that we're going to be having tomorrow. Please take a look. It will take place in on 18th Avenue, 8681 18th Avenue from 4 to 7. There will be representatives from number of districts, including myself. I'm a district leader, District 41, a Republican district leader. There will also be Dmitry Kugel and Lucretia Regina Potter, who's a very popular and very active person. I would love everybody to come. And we have over 600 sets of toys to be gifted to you, friends. So please come. Christmas toy giveaway tomorrow, 4 to 7. Be there.
Do I have 30 seconds?
Sure.
So yes, great toy giveaway. Dmitry Kugel, I know him very well. Great guy. Obviously, you're involved. And George and Heidi Sarantopoulos are getting the toys ready as we speak. I want to talk about our toy drive. So I'm part of the American Hellenic Educational Progressive Association, Brooklyn, Chapter 41. And we're doing a toy drive right now. As a matter of fact, I'm on my way there. We went to the Guild for Exceptional Children Preschool yesterday at a wonderful event. And we also gave to the Healing Center in Bay Ridge, which helps victims of domestic violence. And we're actually doing another, they don't want to be announced, another domestic violence center in Sunset Park. And we will be receiving Brooklyn North Police Department at Holy Cross Church this afternoon. So again, you invited me.
Fantastic. You give me the press release for what you just said, and I will post it under this video.
Oh, terrific. Thank you so much, Yuri.
All right.
Thank you for having
me. Nick, thank you. Thanks a lot. And we'll talk more, because there are some earth shaking under our feet for sure in terms of good changes. We hope they will turn out good. Again, thanks to everybody who's watching and listening, and please come back. And we do things in English from time to time. Subscribe.